If you feel like you're on the content creation hamster wheel, posting on social media, trying to send emails, creating blog posts, and all of that every month, we have content creation expert Kassaundra Foster here, and she's sharing how you can strategize with your content to create one large, long form piece of content and turn it into many much smaller, bite-sized pieces of content to go on multiple platforms. So you're essentially saving yourself so much time and so much mental work by planning everything out ahead of time. So if you're like me and you've been creating the long form content, but not chopping it down into smaller pieces, or you're like former me who is making multiple short form pieces of content to go on Instagram and social media, but you're not creating the long form content, then this is really going to hit home. I want you guys to meet Kassaundra. Hey, Kassaundra, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm great. I am so excited to chat with you today. Content creation. Before we dive in and we start talking about long form content, short form content, all of this, can you start by just telling everybody a little bit about you and your business, who you are, what you do in the teacher entrepreneur space?
Yeah, so I'm actually a former teacher. I was an ELA middle school teacher for a little bit, and then I kind of switched gears and I was a special education preschool teacher for a while, which I really enjoyed. I was really looking for an opportunity to spend more time with my son, and so I decided to transition outside of the classroom, and I found that I could still support teachers and have an impact in education through helping teacher authors market their resources. And I've always enjoyed using social media myself, so I dove in and I started learning about all the ins and outs of social media management. And so then I became a social media manager to help teachers do that. And so now I kind of have the best of both worlds. I get time with my family and I still have a hand in education.
I love that. Could you tell us just a little bit about, like, when people say social media manager, I feel like that kind of spans a very wide gamut. Let's say that I was your client. What would that look like if you were doing social media management? I know that's something that I've always been curious. Like, what does that mean? Like, what are you doing for that business owner?
Sure. So I kind of look at it in tiers. Like if you're thinking about like full social media management, that's when a client comes to me and they basically want to take social media marketing off of their plate. And so I take over, I learn about their business, I come up with a strategy for them based on their goals and what they want to accomplish in their business. I create the posts, I write the copy, I schedule them. In some cases, I'm also engaging for them if that's something that they also want off their plate. A lot of my clients still like to be connected with people who are purchasing from them, which I absolutely love and recommend, but some of them just kind of need it off their plate. And so I just take over and I do everything that pertains to social media. So I create the graphics, I write the copy, I engage with their audience, I do stories. And then there are some clients who come to me and say, I just need this part off my plate. So for some clients, they just need direction. So they just need a strategy. They're like, I still want to be the person creating the content. I still want to be the person engaging, but I just don't know what to do to reach my goals. And so I dive in and I create a strategy for them that they can then implement themselves in order to do that. I look at it, like I said, kind of like some tiers. If you want it completely off of your plate, I take over and I do everything associated with that. And if you just need a little help and direction, I can craft a strategy for you as well.
Okay, so definitely kind of spans the gamut there, which is really nice because I think it's neat sometimes to hear like, okay, there are options for me and for my budget, or there are options that would really suit my own personal business wants and needs, which is really neat. So you run other people's social media accounts and or help them run their own social media marketing. Can you explain the difference between long form content and short form content?
Yes. Okay. So long form content, those are things like blog posts, YouTube videos, podcasts like this, essentially just as their name. They are longer. They include more information about a certain topic. So where you kind of really break it down. Short form content, I look at it kind of in two tiers. So I kind of look at like mid form content would be like email writing to me because that's a little longer than social media posts and includes a little more information than like a social media caption would. And then you have social media posts and captions, which are shorter form content, which kind of give just one little piece of an idea in order to teach your audience that and to get them intrigued and to reach some sort of goal, whether that's them actually going to like read that blog post or listen to that podcast, or if it's getting them to click through and purchase a resource. And so it's kind of like a trickle down effect. So long form content has it all, everything they would want to know about that topic. They can get kind of the full gist, and then it kind of trickles down to where you're breaking it into smaller, more digestible pieces for those platforms, because we know, especially with social media, people have really short attention spans. And so we need to keep what we're sharing with them small and digestible.
I love that. So let's dive into the meat of what we're talking about today, because you help people take their long form content, like their blog posts, YouTube videos, etc., and to repackage it into short form content for social media, Pinterest, I'm assuming, etc. Why is that important? Why should you be taking your long form content and chopping it up into smaller bite-sized pieces of content?
Yeah, and that's essentially what you do, is you chop it up into smaller bite-sized pieces. And there are three really big reasons why, as a social media manager, I am like team long form content and repurposing. And the first one is that it creates consistent messaging across platforms for your brand. So when you take your ideas and your strategies and opinions from one platform and you also discuss them on your other platforms, people are easily able to see what you stand for, and they're easily able to understand what kind of value you can provide to them. And so for a marketing sense, it's really important to grow that know, like, and trust factor, which people have probably heard about a lot, in order to get people to join our community, in order to get them to convert to customers. They need to know us, they need to like us, and they need to trust us. And so having that consistent messaging across the board helps to grow that for you. Another thing is that, like I said, we have such short attention spans. People need to see things multiple times in order for them to understand it, in order for them to act on it. And so you need to have that in multiple places in order for that to happen. It used to be something like people would need to see it like 7 times before it sunk in. Now, preliminary research, since more technology is in our lives every single day, they're saying upwards of like 20 times. So taking that same idea and having it in multiple places and giving your audience members multiple opportunities to interact with that idea is important for them to actually act on that information and use it in their classroom or purchase from you. And the last one is, I think, the most important, and like what I'm on a mission to do. I'm on a mission to create sustainable social media marketing for teacher authors that reaches their goals and fits their capacity. And so it gets you off the content creation hamster wheel, as I call it. If you just focus your energy on one piece of stellar long form content, like one really well written blog, and then you break that down into multiple emails, multiple social media posts, then you're not always trying to come up with another idea to post about. So instead of trying to come up with 25 little ideas to post about across a month, if you focus your energy on like 2 or 4 big ideas that you turn into that long form content and then break it down, it's so much easier mentally for you to do that. And it makes it seem like it isn't such a big task for you to complete. It makes the content creation easier, and you don't feel like you always have to come up with like the next thing to talk about. It's kind of already preloaded there for you.
A couple of things that kind of came to mind when you were talking was, you were talking about how important it is for people to see and be exposed to your content, your ideas, your strategies, your resources multiple times. And, I've got a toddler, so everything kind of goes back to toddlerhood, in my house. And I was reading an article not too long ago that said that basically a child, like a toddler, might have to be exposed to a new food like 23 times before they will actually eat it. And so like put it on the table, like all of this. And I think, we kind of sometimes go, like, even as a parent, I was like, that's ridiculous. I'm not cooking broccoli 23 times and it going uneaten. You know what I mean? But then at the same time, like, if that strategy works, which it did last night, she ate pasta for the first time last night. So, you know what I mean? Yeah. If that strategy works, then you have to be willing to cook the broccoli every night and set it on the table. You have to be willing to put that content out there in multiple places in multiple different ways. And then as this relates to teaching, I think we can all understand and appreciate the fact that number one, students all learn in different ways. And so different people are going to be consuming different types of content. I'm probably not going to read a blog post. The blog post that I read about the broccoli, I read that was the headline. And then I read like maybe 2 sentences into it. And I was like, I got the gist of it. I'm not reading anything else. This is too much for me. However, there are other people like my friend Megan Wisdom, who's a copywriter, and she's like, give me all the information. I want to read the footnotes, I want to read all of it. And so while she may read a blog post, I would watch the Instagram reel. You know what I mean? So like having that available for different types of learners and different types of consumers is extremely important. And then finally, the other thing that you said that really stuck with me was like, you were talking about how this keeps you from having to come up with and constantly churn those wheels of like having to constantly figure out like, what am I posting? What am I creating? And I don't know, when you were in the classroom, did you write lesson plans?
Well, lists of things that we were going to do and how they were going to work out each day and relate to each other. But definitely those like 10-page lesson plans from college were out the window.
Well, okay. So that's how I was. I would have like a mental list. Well, I did it mentally because I'm a mental list person, as if that's going to cut it, right? Like I'd do a mental list. And I would kind of keep track of like, like I know what I'm doing. I've taught this subject multiple times. Like I'm just going to keep like, I know that I've got this activity or that I'm doing this thing, or I'm supposed to be teaching this topic all week long. And so I didn't write my lesson plans. And my assistant principal one year, she was probably like, Lauren, like we're cracking down on lesson plan writing. You actually have to send your lesson plans in every week. And at first, like I moaned, groaned, and complained. But what I quickly learned was that when I wrote that out and I had everything strategized and planned out from the very beginning with that big picture view, it radically changed not how I was teaching, not necessarily what the students were experiencing, but the level of chaos that was happening in my brain, trying to like mentally juggle and make sure everything was planned out just right. And so I can imagine that if you write that big piece of content in the very beginning and have that bird's eye view of how it's going to be chopped up, that's going to save you so much mental stress and anguish, like what you were talking about.
For sure. Definitely. It seems, I think some people are resistant to long form content because it seems like a really big undertaking. And it is. Like, I'm not going to downplay that, but the benefits of taking on that task, like you said, with writing those lesson plans, the benefits of it are amazing because you don't have to worry. So for example, I just started my own podcast and I recorded, I think 7 episodes for the first month. So my launch episodes, and then the few weeks left of April. And I was able to create my whole month's worth of social media content from those like 7 episodes. Wow. And now it's all scheduled and ready to go, and I don't have to worry about it. And it's opened up so much more mental space and capacity to work on other things that are important to me and are important for my clients. And once you get that underway for yourself, you're going to feel that too. Like, just think about, it might kind of stink to have to sit down and write this blog post that's going to take you a while. But at the end of it, you're going to take that and you're going to turn it into your emails. You're going to turn it into your social media content, and your whole month is going to be taken care of. And you're going to be able to focus on the things that mean the most to you and your business, which is what I want for my clients and the teachers I work with. I want you to be able to spend your time where you really love spending your time in your business, whether that's creating resources or any other sort of content, or adding to a course that you're creating, spending your time where you love it. So you have to give a little bit in the beginning and create systems to help you do that. And then once you do that, you can kind of get on autopilot, and then it opens up all of this other mental space, those things you've probably been dreaming about and wanting to do.
Can you share maybe an example of what this would look like practically to take that piece of long form content and to chop it up into different pieces?
Starting off, if I am repurposing for a client and I go to their blog post, I read through the whole thing, and then I start by paying attention to their headers. So what were the big topics that they were talking about throughout throughout that blog post. And then I think about how I can use those bigger ideas to help introduce, like you said, the gist of the blog post to their audience members on social media. And usually what happens is those headers can be great as carousel posts. So you can use those each as like its own slide and give a little more information to entice people to come and read the full post and get all of the information if they want to. Or if there's someone like you, Lauren, who just needs the gist, that's there for them and that's all they need, and they can still take advantage of that information from you. Then what I do is I go through each section and I look for things like lists or breakdowns, and I work on turning those into like infographics. So taking that text heavy piece and turning it into a more visual element that can be listed out easily for people who are scrolling social media. And those things can also work well as carousels or reels as well anytime you have a list. So I take a look for those lists or like those more in-depth breakdowns that you might have in the body of each of those header sections. Then I go back and I take a look at your hook. How did you hook your audience to want to read the rest of this blog post? Because using that hook and transferring it to social media as like a powerful quote graphic can get people thinking about the topic that you're going to be sharing about for that week or over the next few days. It can help you gauge how many people are interested in that topic, and it can just give you some information, especially if you have them engage in a certain way based on that hook and that topic, of how people are going to react to the full blog post, which is important. And then finally, I take note of any like resources or freebies that my client is promoting in that blog post, because you don't want to leave that promotion out. And so we can pull that promotion over to social media so that you're promoting there as well. And within the blog, again, seeing things multiple times helps people act on them. So if we want a little more in-depth example, I can go through one that I would use for like a special ed blog post if you'd like.
Yeah, do it.
Awesome.
Do it.
All right. So if you were writing a blog post, I come most recently from a special ed background. So if I was writing a blog post on the best ways to teach special education students the states of matter, that science concept. And in that post, I introduce 5 of like my go-to activities that I use in order to do that. What I would do is I would take each of those activities and I would create a carousel post where I introduce those activities in a short description or maybe image of them so people can see them and they can read a little bit about them. And then I can use a call to action for people to actually go to the full blog post and read the whole thing if they want more information. And again, if one of my goals is getting more traffic to my blog, that is a great way to do that. And it also allows people to see my resources. So before I even start promoting my resources, they're already shown there in those visuals, in that description, and then even more if people travel over to the blog. Then I could choose one of those activities and think about what is most effective about that activity. And I could create a reel where I show teachers how to conduct that activity, the options for using that kind of activity, and again, using that CTA where they can go to the post, or it could just be a promotion where you're saying, hey, click through my link in bio and you can use this resource in your classroom too. Or you could even focus on some sort of engagement, seeing if people would actually use that activity in their classroom. So again, creating those multiple pieces of content, like you said, because people learn and digest information in different ways. So just making sure that when we're taking a blog post, we're not just creating like 5 static images for that blog post. We're creating carousel posts, we're creating reels, we're using quotes, we're using infographics so that people, it's the same sort of information, nuanced information from that blog, but it's presented in different ways so you can hit all of your audience members. And then for maybe one of the activities, I list out how best to scaffold it. And so I would turn that into some sort of infographic in order to explain like best practices in the hierarchy for teaching the states of matter using that activity. And then beyond that, those ideas to create graphics and visuals, it doesn't just stop there. Go back to the actual copy of your blog post and pull pieces for your caption copy. So in that above example, if I was going to create the infographic with like that hierarchy of how I would scaffold that task for my special education students, I would go back and I would copy and paste probably that exact list that I used in the blog. I might shorten some of the items so that it's a little more digestible and friendly for social media. And then that would become the meat of my caption. And then I would just add a hook to get people to read it, and I would add some sort of call to action. So you can use that information for your visuals, but also for the actual copy that you're writing on social media, which I think is important. And again, doing that means that your messaging is very, very consistent across the board, which is so important.
I love that. Okay. So we're essentially, and I would imagine like you're doing this for people who have already written the blog post and you didn't even write the blog post yourself.
Right.
But I imagine as you're planning out that blog post, you're thinking about how to structure it in a way that's going to be very easy to digest. You're thinking about providing lots of value. And so if you're already in that mindset when you're planning the blog post, then you could probably go ahead and do a little mind map and say, like, when we get to point number 3, I can break this down into these pieces of content. When I get to this point, I can break this down into pieces of content. And so then when you're mapping that blog post out, you're essentially mapping out all of the rest of your content for social media, email marketing, et cetera.
Exactly.
And so, but what you're saying works perfectly for people who have blog posts or have YouTube videos and they haven't been breaking them down into smaller pieces of content. And you have to go back and get in that mindset of like you 3 years ago and trying to remember everything that you said, right? So I think that's just a really amazing example of taking something that we don't usually see infographics when we're writing a blog post. We don't see Instagram reels. We don't see those kind of, we don't see the content in that way because we're writing. But I would imagine that shift starts to change once you start doing it and you start creating those blog posts. I know for me, I don't utilize this strategy. Like I don't. Like I'm talking about it like I know what I'm doing, but like I don't do it. I'm the person who's like taken the lazy approach to it. Like, okay, I'll write the long form content and I'm not doing the short form marketing, which is not right. And I need to do it. But I know like whenever I was doing it, I even started writing my emails differently. Like I started, maybe making it easier for myself by having like 3 points in each email.
Right.
That way I could easily break that down, and kind of having that bird's eye view of it just changes the way that you make content and changes the way that you think about your content. And over time, I would imagine that becomes a lot easier.
It does. And I think the key to making repurposing really sustainable, because at first it can seem overwhelming, like I have to do this new thing and write this long form content and then create all this small content, which I'm already struggling to create anyways, is setting up a system for yourself. So the best thing that I suggest to people who are starting out with repurposing and they're doing their long form content and they want to make that go further is whatever like task management system you're using or however you list out that task of writing that blog post, one of those subtasks should be creating your emails and your social media posts. So that blog is not done until those things are complete. And that helps you in your mind, because your mind will now see that all as one task instead of over here long form content and over here social media content. They come together if you kind of do it in the steps all the way through. And like you said, mind mapping from the beginning of what's going to turn into what, so that as you're writing, you know exactly what you're going to pull, and you can have like 2 screens open and you can be writing and you can be pulling bits of copy over that this is going to be here, this is going to be here, this is going to be there. Awesome. I have written my blog post. I've added my images. That's ready to go. Now I'm going to pop over here into my other document and I'm going to create all my graphics and clean up my captions and schedule, and great. My blog post is done. And now my social media is also done.
That's amazing. That's amazing. It sounds really great in theory. And I know that it is really great in practice, but for somebody who is like me, who says like, I get why, I get the why behind this. Right. I get why I should be posting on multiple platforms and not just making, one piece of content to go on different, you know what I mean? Like I get why I should be breaking it down, but the time, what kind of time commitment are we talking about start to finish to create that long form content and then break it up into the smaller short form content?
Sure. I guess it depends how long you've been creating long form content for. Obviously, if you're just going to start out creating long form content, it's going to take a little longer. But if you've been creating long form content, so probably a few hours to map everything out, write your whole blog. And while you're doing that, if you're pulling over those pieces of copy and those ideas, and then, depending on if you have graphic templates or if you're creating them from scratch. I mean, if you're creating them from scratch, it's probably going to take another hour or two. But I would say build in as much automation as possible for yourself. So probably if you're just starting out, it's probably going to take about 4 hours would be my guess, probably like 2 hours for your blog post, 2 hours to really clean everything up and create your graphics. But you can drastically reduce that time by setting up some systems for yourself. So having some sort of blog outline already like in where you write your blog so that you can copy and paste that and just adjust as needed. Already having it set up, like I said, so you have those two screens going. Like, when I sit down to write a blog post, this is where I'm like writing the meat and this is where I'm pulling over for social media with that mind map. And also having templates for your graphics. So going through and creating some branded templates in the beginning, things for like static posts, things for carousel posts, reels, covers, infographics, so that you can pick and choose those as you go. And you can just change like the colors, change out what you're talking about. That's going to save you a ton of time. So in the beginning, doing that little work ahead of time to set up those systems and those pieces that will help you automate is going to save you a lot of time in the long run.
I love it. I love it. Okay. So tell us a little bit about, because you're coming to Teacher Seller Summit.
Yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about your session at Teacher Seller Summit and what you're going to be talking about and sharing there?
Sure. So kind of like this, we're going to be talking repurposing long form content, but we're going to do a deep dive into it. We're going to be talking about how you can take your content, what kind of content works, long form content works best for different kinds of short form content. We're going to be going through like a full example, and you can see like the blog post and what I actually made for graphics and captions from those so that you can get an idea of how to build that for yourself. So definitely just a deep dive into the what am I going to do when I have this piece of long form content sitting in front of me, and how am I taking that from point A to point B and getting it onto social media.
I love it. Okay. All right. Where can listeners find you and connect with you if they want to learn more or hire you to take over their content?
Yeah. So I am on Instagram. It's at Foster Content Solutions. So my business is K Foster Content Solutions. So you can find me there. I also have my own podcast called Schooled in Socials. And that's where I talk each week about leveraging your social media for your teacherpreneur business and creating those sustainable strategies and habits to make it easier for yourself. So those two places are great places to connect.
I love it. Well, thank you so much for being here, Kassaundra. I'm so glad that you came, and thank you for sharing your expertise and for giving me a little kick in the seat of the pants to actually chop up some of my content. And so maybe by the time that this airs, there will be people that you'll be seeing me actually present on social media with some of the podcast stuff. So
I would love that.
Yeah, maybe that'll happen. Well, yeah. Fingers crossed. I'll try. Like that's usually how this goes. I'm like, I'm gonna do it, and then it doesn't happen. But hopefully, we're gonna try it. We're gonna try it this time. Thank you so much for being here, Kassaundra.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for being here. If you want to learn more about Teacher Seller Summit, then you can visit the link down inside of the description. Teacher Seller Summit is an incredible, one-of-a-kind virtual business conference for teacher entrepreneurs. We're covering things like selling on Teachers Pay Teachers, creating your own blog posts, selling your resources on your own website, diversifying your income stream, being an influencer on Instagram, and so much more. Whether you just started your Teachers Pay Teachers journey and you want to learn from experienced sellers, or you've been selling on TPT for years and you want to learn more about diversifying your income stream, This conference is absolutely for you. You can visit the link down in the description to get your ticket. And if you want to connect with Kassaundra, you'll find all of the links to her Instagram, to her website, and more so that you can connect with her and learn more from her. Thanks so much for being here today. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like it and subscribe. I put out weekly content for teacher entrepreneurs, helping you grow your business in a way that's purposeful and sustainable. And I will see you in the next video.